Story 1. Blind trust with absolutely zero communication with the trustee beyond statements like, "Here is some money. Invest it wisely for me," or "I need some money. Sell some of what I currently have," or a generic overview of performance only until they leave office is not advisable. If they want to invest or reap some rewards, they can, but they have no specific knowledge of what their money is being invested in or which shares are sold. An exception might be established index funds, where they can request or directly purchase an investment in a particular index, but no requests for individual stocks are allowed. Story 2. No and no. Besides the flagrant insider trading, look at it this way. We could get rid of the lifelong politician. Right now, you have people covering for us just so they can stay in office and get rich. They don't care about the general population. They stay in office so long they lose touch with what's actually going on in the country. They live in their own little bubble, and that bubble only serves themselves. If they could not engage in insider trading, they would not stay in office as long as they do. And that is true for both political parties. Story 3. Fortunately for the politicians, they are already extremely wealthy and can pay to have the bills rejected, whether through bribes, lawyers, or blackmail. Story 4. Either no stocks at all, limit them to blind trusts, or enforce a 2-day waiting period. They need to publicly announce their intention to buy or sell 2 business days prior to the transaction. Story 5. This is one of the few issues where there is agreement across the political divide. Insider trading by members of Congress needs to end. All members of Congress, upon taking office, must place their assets and those of their spouses into a blind trust. A nonpartisan body with real authority and the power to compel witnesses should be established to investigate instances of corruption. All members of Congress should be held to the same standards as employees of corporate regulators. First past the post elections should be ended. This change would also increase the number of parties that corporations need to engage with. Story 6. This has all been done before. They will pass a law saying no insider trading for Washington, D.C. Everyone will applaud and say how wonderful they are for being honest. A couple of days later, under the cover of darkness, they will reverse it without any mention, and it will be business as usual. Honestly, if I had understood how much easy money you could make holding a public office, I would have been a politician. Story 7. It will not do much good because they will just have their assets in trusts or have their spouses' names on their accounts. Story 8. A particular British political television journalist and broadcaster put all his investments into a blind trust before taking the job because he felt it would be unethical to trade in the markets while commenting on them. If it is the right thing for him to do, it is doubly so for a politician. Story 9. If they stop making money from insider trading, they will have to return to the old ways of blackmail and corruption. Who can live off a politician's salary in these difficult times? Story 10. It is surprising that I had stricter rules around trading when I worked in information technology for a large United States bank with no real access to material non-public information than the members of Congress who literally set policy in the United States. Story 11. I think that would be a good idea. Let them still own stock, since many owned it before taking office, but do not let them move it or buy more. Unfortunately, even if something like that passed, they would find a loophole to do it anyway. Story 12. I think it should be prohibited. They can be in indexes or other areas, but active trades should be restricted to fixed trading windows if anything. Unfortunately, if they are not honest, they will always find a way around such a rule, like giving tips to an employee or associate to trade on their behalf, or just directly selling tips to other traders, perhaps in exchange for donations. Story 13. We could do that or require them to reveal trades in real time so we can copy the trades of the most successful traders. Story 14. They will just whisper in the ear of other traders or family members. Do not worry, no matter what, they will get theirs. Story 15. These bills are all performative. They will never pass and they know it. Do we really think that people are going to vote against their own interests? It won't happen until it is too late. They will drive this issue off the cliff first. Story 16. No. Nothing. You are in a government office. Your sacrifice is to be financially above reproach. That should be your desire. However, it seems as though it is seen as an easy opportunity. Story 17. We pay them a salary. They should not be actively enriching themselves. Maybe they should work. It seems like many of them skip reading bills and know little about what their constituents actually want. They can just have a retirement account like the rest of us. Story 18. Democrats only introduce proposals like that because they know they will not pass. They always pretend to fight for what is right when they know they will lose, so they can demonstrate their values to their voters without upsetting their corporate supporters. Story 19. That will never pass. I could see some members of the Democratic Party voting for it, but not all of them. We cannot get rid of the infinite money glitch. Story 20. 10 years ago, I would say it was probably not a reasonable restriction. However, given Donald Trump's blatant manipulation of the markets, it is clear that it is too prone to abuse. It is always that one person who takes everything too far. Story 21. Next, ban the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Defense from trading individual stocks. Also, prohibit other government employees who manage multi-billion-dollar contracts using government funds. Story 22. The same restrictions should be applied to family members and other individuals who share their financial interests. Story 23. I am guessing the president is not included. Instead of a ban, how about all gains go to the federal treasury? Story 24. I'm sure this bill you speak of has no real impact. It sounds good on paper to us, but has easy workarounds for those in power. Can't trade individual stocks? I guess I'll just have to trade two at a time. I can't trade stocks, but my significant other can. Story 25. My husband is a company insider at his job. He is not allowed to trade his company's stock on certain days. I am also not allowed to do anything with his company's stock on certain days. I believe insiders should not be able to trade. Story 26. Require them to use a blind trust brokerage while they hold office. For those who do not comply, remove them from office. Simple in a rational world. Story 27. Any and all politicians should be required to place all assets, aside from personal properties like private residences and similar items, into a blind trust. They should also be required to disclose 10 years of tax returns and redacted financial data to the public prior to being allowed to run for office. The public should have a clear understanding of who the candidate has worked for before their name appears on the ballot. Furthermore, politicians should be required to maintain the blind trust for 1 to 2 years after leaving office to ensure a layer of separation between them and the office. Additionally, there should be a 5 to 10-year ban on lobbying and consultant work for politicians and high-ranking public servants in the federal bureaucracy after they leave office. Too many politicians are elected, engage in corrupt activities, and then accept lucrative consultant jobs from companies they help profit. Story 28. Personally, I want to take a strict approach. 0 individual stocks owned by you, your spouse, or young children. Everything must be in broad-based mutual funds with ample notice before buying or selling. Clear laws against transferring ownership to adult children and then getting it back afterward. If you own a company and want to serve the country, that is great, but there needs to be a sacrifice on your part. I would also have limits on how much you can earn once you leave office, for example, 1.5 times your salary for half the time you were in office. No outside money and extremely high levels of audits. If a senator is out golfing and runs out of balls, he should be unable to borrow a friend's to finish the game. No free trips, car rides, or expensive meals. I want the job to be difficult and require sacrifice to serve. Story 29. They should stick to politics, not portfolio picks. Ban trading to keep it real and avoid insider drama. Story 30. They will just use a loophole. For example, they cannot trade stocks, but they can trade cryptocurrency or bet on polymarket outcomes. Story 31. They literally get to choose which projects are done and which companies will fulfill them. It is completely unethical to allow them to trade that information. Story 32. Let's put this into explain like IM5 context. Your 5-year-old has his hand in a jar of your expensive cookies and keeps pulling them out and eating them. As a parent, you tell him to stop. He does not. He continues to eat the cookies while smirking at you because, what real power do you have to enforce this rule which does not please him? The 7-year-old sibling wants to help by making more serious rules with steeper consequences for the continued cookie jar rating. But the 5-year-old goes on eating the cookies all for himself, leaving you and the rest of the family with none. This is where we are as a country. The politicians who trade are the 5-year-old. The 7-year-old sibling are the politicians who want to put a lock on trading while in office. The taxpayers are the parents. Story 33. I wholeheartedly agree that either index funds, blind trusts, bonds, or similar investments are appropriate. Something where individuals cannot cheat the system. However, how far down should this apply? State Senate, mayor, city council? I am not saying it is a bad idea because I agree with it, but it needs to be nuanced, well thought out, and carefully planned. Story 34. I would argue something completely different. Nothing that the United States Congress does should be private in such a way as to enable insider trading in the first place. Any such act of Congress that is private like that should be made public by law. Story 35. Yes. However, all their trades should be announced publicly 2 days prior to execution to give the markets time to adjust. Story 36. Imagine what an advantage it would be to have a 30-minute heads-up on whatever unexpected content Mr. Kankles is going to post on social media. Personally, I think every elected official should publicly state their intent to buy or sell any investment, perhaps with a 15-day notice. Story 37. I think they should be able to buy and sell the SPDR S&P 500 exchange-traded fund so they can remain invested in the market, but they should provide 2 weeks' notice before their intent to buy or sell. Alternatively, all their money could be placed into a managed fund, and a firm could handle the trading for all political figures. Story 38. If allowed, it should be transparent and real-time so the public has the same option to purchase. Story 39. I work in a government position and have to file conflict of interest forms every year stating what stocks I own and other relevant information. I do not want to complete all the paperwork, so I only invest in managed funds. The least others should do is what I, a lowly government employee, must do, including the Supreme Court. Story 40. Everything a politician owns should be put into a blind trust while they are in office. Anything less is inviting corruption. Story 41. If you have insider knowledge about what is going to happen, that you should not be able to enter the millionaire or billionaire tax bracket because of that. If you cannot afford to live on a government salary, then you are probably not qualified to be a politician. You are just a person in a suit. Story 42. They are not enforcing the laws that we currently have. What makes you think they will enforce this law? Story 43. It is obvious that politicians and government employees who control decision-making, policy, and law should not be allowed to trade stocks. Story 44. I have to say, of all the things horribly broken in our government by design, this is not high on the current list. Story 45. Blind index fund with no ability to add new purchases while in office. They can request to sell if needed, but that is it. Political office should not be about making money, and their salary and benefits should be more than enough. If they do not like it, leave public office and let the door hit you on the way out. Once that is done, we can address campaign finance reform. Story 46. Let's do this by tiers. Absolutely not. That's pure corruption. It's almost embezzlement. But to go further, they shouldn't be able to be involved in any outside business related to the functions of their office. They shouldn't even be allowed to communicate with members of the industries their office affects. There's only one purpose such communication can serve. As for stock trading, anyone who communicates with such officials shouldn't be allowed to trade. I'm pretty sure this is already the law, but it is often broken. To go even further, nobody should be allowed to trade at all. Speculation is the reason our economy and inflation are out of control, and financial crime is more prevalent in finance than in actual business. Close the market. Story 47. If insider trading lands regular people in prison, it should land politicians there twice as fast. You work for the people, not your portfolio. Period. Story 48. Nowhere else does having access to insider information mean you are not allowed to trade stocks. It does mean you are not allowed to use material non-public information to affect your trading behavior, and doing so is already illegal. Story 49. No one believes they should. However, they think they should, and that is all that matters. They are all despicable people except for a handful. Story 50. I think that any holdings they have with companies should be blind holdings, and both they and their immediate family should not be allowed to engage in inactive trading. Story 51. No, they should not be able to trade. It is infuriating to always see how the people who write the rules are allowed to benefit from breaking them. That is not corruption. It is just legalized advantage dressed in patriotism. Story 52. Frankly, I think at the federal level, anyone elected to office should have to dispose of all their assets. All of them, including spousal assets, donating the proceeds to charities selected from a vetted list based on their holdings from 5 years prior. They should then live in federally provided housing in Washington, D.C., and the same arrangement should apply in their home area. After their term, they get to live in their former district in a house of average value in an average neighborhood, paid for as part of their retirement. They cannot hold any further working positions and receive a pension based on Social Security level payments to live on. All finances should be monitored while in office and retirement. Drastic? Absolutely. But they wanted to serve the public, right? Let them do the job without the expectation of exploiting the system for gain. Story 53. They should have to obey the same laws as the rest of us. Sadly, they are the ones who get to make that decision. Story 54. No, but while they are allowed to buy the exchange-traded funds. Story 55. No individual stock sales are allowed, and automatic impeachment will occur if individuals are found to be sharing confidential information due to government decisions. It should have always been illegal. They take time to take whatever they can get their hands on. Story 56. One where peace does not feel like a temporary break from chaos, just consistent calm, freedom, and purpose without having to constantly fight for it. Story 57. No, they should not. They should be entirely unable to do so. There should also be a limit on how many times they can run and work in that capacity. Too many things are lost because members of Congress are scared to lose re-election. Nancy Pelosi has the best stock trading track record for a reason. She has access to a great deal of insider information and knows how to act on it. Story 58. Like others have said, they influence corporate policy through legislation and various methods to obtain insider information. Those bills are not going to pass. Story 59. Politicians should only be allowed to trade through investment brokers. The moment they manage their own funds, it creates a conflict of interest. Story 60. They need to live on the median salary of their state or district. Watch real change happen in minutes. Story 61. People so determined to fight corruption they overcompensate with plans just shy of, and I am only slightly exaggerating for effect. If a politician picks up a penny they find on the ground because see a penny, pick it up and all the day you will have good luck. They should be publicly guillotined for treason or at least high crimes and misdemeanors because that is outside income motivated by backwards superstition. Story 62. No, and their immediate family should absolutely be banned from stock trading as well. It is blatant corruption and can easily be used to launder bribes. Any stocks they have should be locked behind an impenetrable barrier and handled by a third party with whom they are not allowed to communicate under penalty of law. Story 63. If you hold a position in any level of government where you receive classified information that could allow you to make significant profits in the stock market, you should not be allowed to buy or sell stocks until you no longer hold that position. This means that most high-level politicians would be banned for life or would have to stop receiving classified information after leaving office. For example, former presidents, senators, and members of Congress continue to receive briefings long after they have left office. Story 64. They make enough from the salary they increase every chance they get. No insider trading. No one over 50 to 60 years old. Set their salary to match the lowest earning constituent. It will never happen, but that last one would certainly encourage change. Edit. They apparently have not raised it since 2009, which was surprising to me. Thank you for the correction. Story 65. No, but it does not really matter. Where there is a will to lie, cheat, and steal, there is a way. For me, it is all about term limits to keep these people from amassing too much power. Story 66. They should only be allowed to receive payment for the job or position to which they were elected. No stocks, no lobbying money, no campaign contributions, just the salary for the job. If that were the case, they would work harder for the constituents to maintain their office, and the country would be a better place. Story 67. They should not be allowed. In fact, I would go further. Do not let them own businesses or have jobs outside of their elected office. Story 68. In my ideal world, elected officials would receive a comfortable middle-class salary for the rest of their lives, but would be prohibited from earning income from any other source. No stocks, no outside business ventures, no lucrative board positions, and no books purchased in large quantities by think tanks. You can have power or you can have money, but you cannot have both. Story 69. This is one of those things that 100% should be illegal, but it will never happen because politicians seldom pass any rules that personally hurt them. Story 70. Absolutely not. Not them, nor any affiliate of theirs. I think ancient Roman times had it right. Senators disclosed their wealth when they began and ended their political careers. Any large, unaccounted for discrepancy was cause for imprisonment or death. Story 71. Senators and members of Congress should not be allowed to earn any money outside their government salary while in office. No speaking engagements. No book tours. No stock trading. If you do not like it, do not choose public service as a career. Our politicians are not supposed to be wealthy. Story 72. We have a president who introduced a cryptocurrency that allows them to legally take bribes openly. There is very little chance the United States Congress will pass a law to restrict its own power. Story 73. I believe that whoever is elected should be able to do anything he wants as long as he is a member of the Republican Party. Story 74. As unrealistic and unlikely as it would be, all politicians at this level should be required to turn over any investments to a government-managed fund that measures growth based on performance metrics designed to reward positive change and penalize negative change. For example, if a politician implements social programs for disadvantaged people, there would be a better return on investment. If they support an authoritarian police state, they would lose money. Story 75. There have been many suggestions about how to address the larger problem of corruption among members of Congress, but many are excessively punitive to the point of absurdity. Setting aside valid arguments for preventing insider trading and corruption, which I largely agree with, I worry that cutting off someone's ability to generate wealth beyond their salary will contribute more to corruption rather than reduce it. The average member of Congress earns approximately $175,000 per year in salary. For the average American, this is a considerable amount, but considering they need a place to live in the capital, which is not cheap, as well as their own home state or district, that salary may struggle to cover expenses comfortably for most representatives. The schools of good quality in Washington, D.C. are all private, adding substantial costs for those with families. Despite misinformation, members of Congress also pay income taxes, property taxes, and other taxes like everyone else. All of this, along with other factors, means many representatives may struggle financially to perform their duties without using the stock market as a tool to generate additional wealth and income. Removing this option without careful consideration could greatly increase the risk of corruption. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.